Well, good morning, everybody. In this video, I'd like to cover the highlights and the forecast here. I'm going to start off with a place I didn't start off in my in-depth video, and that is in South America. Just after I finished recording the in-depth video this morning, I went out and looked at some satellite data from yesterday because I was interested to see this tropical system that had shown up here. I missed it when I was looking at the weather last night and this morning, but just poking around here, something kind of fascinating showed up. It's this. It's named Acara. If you're curious where you are in the world, there's like Rio Grande do Sul, and there's Rio de Janeiro, so you can kind of see where you are in South America. You're just in the South Atlantic. Now, why this is important is because tropical systems in this part of the world are extremely rare. If you look throughout history, you find that while 2/3 of all tropical systems are in the Northern Hemisphere, this part of the South Pacific and this part of the South Atlantic, they're very rare. And to my knowledge, there's only been two, since we've been keeping accurate records, that have shown up in the South Atlantic, making this maybe the third system to show up here. Now, typically the waters are too cool, the wind shear is too high, and on top of all of that, we're in the dry subtropics, here and here, and as a result, very, very infrequent tropical cyclone formation. But it's always fascinating to look at and digest this map. For example, because of Earth's Coriolis effect, no tropical system ever crosses the equator. Just kind of something neat to think about there. Now, why I missed it was because I was more fascinated with the snow that came across North America over the weekend, this kind of stripe right in through here. And what was interesting to me was, as we looked again at some satellite data this morning, we can watch that snow continue to melt. And what I'm excited about is this is a lot of moisture getting back into the soil. Yesterday, as the temperatures really popped back up there, you can watch the snow just eroding in these two areas across parts of the Midwest. We'll talk about the West in a moment here. But I did fly over some of this yesterday. And as I flew over the top of it, you could see this was in southern Illinois. This is just kind of this spot right here where you can see how sharp of a divide it is from where the snow was and where the snow wasn't. Just kind of fascinating to see that overall. But a lot of our attention to start the week is going to go in the west, and that's where I want to begin. This is what's currently churning off the west coast, and this deep low is going to be moving basically from here straight toward kind of the Puget Sound area. But it's going to create quite the wind shear profile over this part of the Central Valley of California, which is why the Storm Prediction Center has the risk out for rotating thunderstorms, which could produce tornadoes. They could produce straight line wind damage and also hail in this area today. Overall, though, if you look across California, we have flood watches, high wind watches, and warnings. We also have throughout this area, this is all winter storm warning for parts of the Sierra Nevada. Quite strong winds in the Great Basin as well. And a lot of our attention is going to be here to start off the week. We expect over the next 10 days to get two systems to come into California. The first one is here this early part of the week that just sits off the coast. The second one shows up, this is Thursday into Friday and Saturday, sitting right there. But what I'm fascinated by is this. That is finally the beginning of the polar jet stream making its way into the Pacific Northwest by next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And as it does so, watch what it does over the Rocky Mountains here. It kicks off one system there, and possibly as this deeper low shows up off the west coast, the 29th through the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, we get into that classic spring pattern. Whoops, sorry about that. Get into that classic spring pattern that does something like this. And southwest flow tends to set things off over the western United States first, over the Rockies second, out into the central United States third, and eventually off to the east. Now, this pattern will influence temperatures, but also precipitation. Since I started the discussion in the west, I just want to show you that over the next 10 days, two systems coming to California, one today, one that's coming in late this weekend, that's this low here, and then you have the new flow showing up next week coming in out of the northwest. So what you're looking at here is just total accumulated precipitation in the west from this morning's 0Z run from the European model, and it's got a lot of moisture for the western United States. And some of this is going to be some pretty heavy snow on both the Cascades and in the Sierra Nevada. Now, to give you kind of an overall sense, we're going to play this pretty quickly. The GFS is on the left, the European's on the right. So that's system number one. You can see that the low by Wednesday, early Wednesday morning, just moved over parts of the Puget Sound. But California, pretty rough start to this week. We then watched the wave that moved over California try Thursday into Friday to get out into the plains, but it seems to not be able to tap into moisture until it gets over the kind of the central and eastern corn belt here before it moves east. See that? Following it, here's our next system, Saturday into Sunday coming into the west, but watch this. That's where the real change comes in the pattern. The Northern Pacific jet, finally engages, and you can just see it. Watch. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. So we get this flow coming in like that. And that's what's really going to set up the whole of the United States for a much more active finish of February and start of March. So let's go ahead and add it up on the European model. Throughout this week, that's through Wednesday. Now watch right in through here. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There goes our system. Most of this section of the country and down in the southwest drier. But California, over the next 7 or 8 days, getting a lot of moisture. Then watch the Northwest. Ready? This is next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. See that? Look at the change in the pattern. We're starting to pull in flow like this. It's also in the European model at that time, or excuse me, the GFS at that time as well. So European and GFS. Total snow over the next 10 days, all of it adding up to the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada, but the Northern Rockies get in on this as well. And the GFS is even trying to bring some of that snow out here into parts of the Southern Canadian Prairie and Northern Plains. I'll be watching that very carefully next week. The good news about all of this is we're going to start to revive snow in this area where we desperately need it. And if the flow comes across the Northern Plains, we could hit this drier region since the beginning of this new year that's missed out on a lot of this precipitation. So let's look at it in terms of who's going to be on the wetter side of this. Over the next 10 days, you can see that it's this region in here in the Ohio River Valley and the West Coast. And if you look at the West Coast, they're really going to be adding up a lot. That's the chance of 2 inches and the chance of 4. But again, once we get out there past the end of this month, look at that. That's the polar jet, and there's the subtropical jet. And that is a setup for very active U.S. weather. And to be honest, I think the GFS is going to be late to the game. The European and the CPC are probably the best representations of this. And you can start to see the activity open. Like, see the drier air in through here. That could be the opening up of some dry slot activity. A lot of systems rolling through. Expect severe weather. Expect moisture advection. Expect this pattern to really get active at that time frame. How about into March? Well, you can see the longer term pattern in March is still opening up this whole region to wetter than normal conditions. Now, on the temperature side of this, a lot of that story is being written by the contrast in Central Asia versus Southeast Asia. This is where we're going to really accelerate the jet out of the Pacific Ocean. And that's going to influence that March pattern. But in the meantime, we open back up in the central United States to some very mild conditions. We're cooler east, cooler west, but very mild in the central United States to the middle of this week. And by the end of this week, most of the country's near normal to above normal temperatures. It's only the north, the eastern United States that kind of hangs on to that cooler air the longest. Day 5 through 10, still very mild here. Day 10 through 15, still quite mild. And this is the GFS solution. The European's even more mild, day 10 through 15. Now, go watch that longer range video at the very end of it, because in it I cover what I'm expecting to have happen once we get out there into March, April, and May. We're going to compare that to the CPC. We're going to look at El Nino and talk about analog years. I want you to go watch that because I spent a little bit of time this morning focusing in on that all the way through summer. But to finish this one up, I want to take you back to South America because my story is still about the potential early end of the monsoon in April. That's going to be key. In the near term, there's good moisture in here where we just planted a safrinha crop. It's later that I'm concerned about. So we'll leave it at that, and I'll pick this back up again tomorrow. Thanks.